Hey there, and welcome to another how-to for our Cadillac CTS. Today we're going to be installing the original ATS-V rear sway bar in our CTS. Now this should work for most CTSs of the third generation, but it won't work for the CTS-V, I know that for sure. Now, your first question is probably, hey, what the heck is a sway bar? Well, sway bar, often referred to as an anti-roll bar, is just that. It helps keep the car from rolling in turns. It will keep your car nice and flat in the turns if you've got really tight sway bars, but it will affect your ride quality just a little bit. You see, the sway bar is just a long metal bar, and it connects the left tire with the rear tire on that end of the vehicle, in this case the rear end. So when you make, say, a right-hand turn and the car leans into the left, that left suspension is going to compress up into the wheel well, right? Well, the sway bar connects all the way to the right side and helps pull down the right side of the car and keep it closer to the road and keep it nice and level and flat. Now, it'll only do as much as it can, and if the car rolls too much, well, of course, the car will lean and it will end up sort of picking up the right-hand tire, and then you're three-wheeling it. That's probably not going to happen here on the CTS, but we do see it a lot in autocross on like Ford Focuses and Miatas and such when they're on the brakes doing a hard turn and they've got a nice sway bar. It's kind of neat to watch. Otherwise, you're probably wondering, well, why are we only doing the rear? Well, you see, I have autocrossed this car a lot, and what I found is it does have a bit of understeer. What that means is if you go too hard into a turn, the front end is going to slide to the outside of the turn. You don't want that. It makes it really hard to continue making the turn in the direction that you want. Now, this is as opposed to oversteer, where the rear end breaks loose and slides to the outside of the turn, kind of like what drifters do. Both of those situations are bad for lap times. So we want the car to perform better by getting the front end to stick better. Now there's a few things we can do. Number one, we can adjust our tire pressures. And I've definitely done a variance of tire pressures, and I've kind of reached my limit and it didn't help too much. The next thing is camber. You see, cars have, in the front wheels, the tops of them are leaning inward towards the inside of the wheel wells. For your Cadillac CTS, it might be 0 degrees of tilt in the inside of the wheel wells, or up to maybe ½ a degree. I've had mine adjusted to 2 degrees, and what this does is it helps make sure that the outside wheel is really planted and the tread is getting maximum grip on the road when you're in the turn. Now, it has helped a bit, and I can't really get too much more camber in there. Plus, you'll see that my wheels are sort of tucked in under the front. I don't really like the looks, but hey, if it drives better at autocross, that's what's important for me. Now, the next thing is that generally you would say if you're losing traction in one area, you should tighten up the opposite end or loosen up the end that's losing traction. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Now, there's not much more I can adjust in the front. We don't have any really user adjustable sections of the suspension on this car, so let's go to the rear. What can we do to tighten it up? Not much. The easiest, cheapest, most simple thing is upgrade that rear sway bar. And so the ATS-V sway bar should be marginally bigger than the V-Sport sway bar. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. We'll eventually see. There are other ATS-V sway bars out there, aftermarket ones. Rennick Performance makes a great set with some beefier sway bars, including a rear one that's slightly bigger. That's about $700 or $800. Unfortunately, they don't sell just the rear one. So I just wanted to give this a shot. I ordered an ATS-V original rear sway bar from thatgmpartsguy.com, link in the description below. It was only $125 shipped to my door. Now, this sway bar is only marginally bigger than the V-Sport one, but we're going to see just how much bigger it is once we get them both out, and we'll do a comparison. The install isn't too hard. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts, I think, and we'll pull out the sway bar and put the new one in. The hardest part might be getting it out. We're going to try a couple different methods and you'll see. Otherwise, let's get to the install and see how it improves the performance of our car, and hopefully we can get rid of some of that nasty understeer. Hey there, hold up. One more thing before we get on to the installation. I'm the Sweaty Daniel from after the installation. I've already installed the sway bar, but I wanted to give you a heads up on a couple things before you watch the whole video. I do have the CTS-V rear end, which means that underneath there's a few slight differences that you'll see in the video, but I think you can work around it in your own car. Now, I found out that you really do need to drop the exhaust to get the sway bar out. Initially, you'll see me use long extensions to get to the mid-link bushing bolts, but if you lower the exhaust, you'll be able to get to those a lot easier to remove the sway bar. Now, if you've put quad tips through your stock outlets on your normal V-Sport bumper, this may be difficult as those tips are not going to drop down because they're stuck through a hole. So you may need to consider an alternative method to get this done. All right, so let's get on to the real installation now, and you'll see how it's done. For this installation, you'll want the following tools. You'll definitely want some gloves, as there are some sharp edges and it's pretty dirty under the car. You'll want a torque wrench to properly torque down your wheels once you put them back on. A standard ratchet wrench is helpful. This 15mm combination wrench, I really like this one with the ratcheting closed end. It makes things so much easier. Deep and shallow sockets, 15mm in size. This 7/8 inch or a 22mm socket for your stock lug nuts. A number 6 Allen head wrench. Various extensions, these are wobble extensions and they make it a lot easier to get into tight spots. You'll also want this exhaust hanger removal tool. Although it can be done without it, believe me, this is worth the 20 bucks. Also, some silicone spray or WD-40 will help get those hangers off easier. Of course, you'll also need a jack and jack stands. Now for your 35-second overview. First, jack up the car, remove the wheels, and put it on stands. Then you remove 3 exhaust hangers from each side of the car, lower the exhaust, and remove the nuts on the sway bar end links. Then you can remove 2 bolts on each side for the mid links, remove the sway bar, put the new one back in and attach it with the mid-link bolts and brackets. Attach the sway bar end links again, rehang your exhaust with the 6 hangers, then put your wheels back on, lower the car, and you're done. Now for the detailed install. First we'll want to jack up the car, put it on jack stands, and remove the wheels. For proper methods on doing this, please check out my other videos. Now we'll remove the exhaust hangers. Spray them with a little silicone spray or WD-40, and then use your handy tool to remove the rubber hangers. There's one just behind the axle, and then there's one just ahead of the axle here. It doesn't matter which order you remove them, but I would say save the ones at the tips for last. Now the hanger near the exhaust outlets are a little different. You'll see 2 nuts, this one, and then this one up here. These are 15mm nuts. They'll remove a bracket which has the rubber exhaust hanger on it. The exhaust doesn't move forward or backward, so it's hard to just pull it off of the rubber section. So we'll remove the bracket and then pull that off of the hanger tip. Then you can gently lower the exhaust using your jack. Now we're going to remove the sway bar. First we'll do the end links, and then we'll do the 2 mid-link bolts right here. For the end link, you need a 15mm. Now you can't just attack it with your ratchet, because if you do, the end link bolt will just turn. This is a safety feature. So instead use your combination wrench, plus your number 6 hex wrench or Allen key. Hold the end link bolt in place while you turn the nut. Then just flex the end link until it comes out from the sway bar. Do the same thing on the other side. Remove the nut and then pull the end link from the sway bar. Now we got to do the mid links. Here was the end link, and then right over here is the mid links where the sway bar is attached to the frame. There are 2 bolts there. They're both 15mm. The lower one is easy to get to with your regular ratchet and a socket. After that, I made this long extension. Now at first I didn't lower the exhaust completely as I suggested you do, so I had to squeeze in between the splash shield and the muffler to get to these mid-link bolts. Here you can see the top one. But when you lower the muffler like I suggested, this will be a lot easier to do, but you may still need the extension. Now as you remove this bolt, feel how tight it is. When you put it back in there, you'll want it in there just as tight so it doesn't back out. Once it's out, the sway bar will be free. Then move on to the other side. Now we can try to get the sway bar out. Remember, I didn't lower the exhaust completely at first, so I struggled to pull it out through one side, and doing this by myself was pretty difficult. However, you'll lower the exhaust completely and you'll just be able to pull it out the backside. Here are the two sway bars right next to each other. The V-Sport sway bar is here on the right. Notice the bracket comes right off the small bushing. The bracket is the same size as the ATS-V bracket, so we know it'll bolt up right to the frame. But look at the small bushing on the V-Sport. Compared to the one on the ATS-V, the bracket doesn't even seem to come off and the bushing seems really stout. Now let's measure the V-Sport sway bar. It comes out at 23.47 millimeters. The ATS-V sway bar is a little bigger, coming out at 26.2 millimeters. So the stock V-Sport sway bar is 23.47 millimeters and the stock ATS-V sway bar is 26.2 millimeters. That's a 2.73 millimeter difference. So 11.6 improvement in size. That's great. Now it's time to put the new sway bar in. Here I've hung the ATS-V sway bar on my muffler so I can access it better when I lay down under the car. Just slide it into position under the frame where it attaches, and then twist it and put it into position and pin it in place with one of the lower mid-link bolts. Then move on to the other side and pin it in place with the other lower mid-link bolt. You can screw it down a bit, but don't torque it all the way. We'll do that after we get the top ones in. Now use your special tool to reach up in there and put the top mid-link bolts in. Once you get them screwed in, torque them both down to 43 foot-pounds of torque. You won't be able to get a torque wrench in there, so you'll have to just eyeball it. Now we'll put the end links back on. It'll take a little more force to flex that new ATS-V sway bar down and get the end link in. Put the nut on, but remember, you can't just tighten down the nut because the end link bolt will turn. See? So get your Allen head wrench, put it in there to hold the end link bolt, and then you can tighten down the end link nut. Tighten this down to 32 foot-pounds. Now it's time to rehang the exhaust. There's one hanger ahead of the axle, one behind the axle, and then the other one, of course, by the exhaust outlets. Let's start with the one ahead of the axle first. Just hold the exhaust up and move the rubber piece over the tip. You may use a jack to help support the exhaust. Then get the hanger after the axle. And then you want to put the bracket with the rubber piece over the metal hanger. You can just do it by hand, no tools necessary. And then you have to position the bracket over the studs. Put your 15 millimeter nuts back on and tighten them down. I don't have a torque number for this, so just make sure they're snug and they won't back out. Now you can just put your wheels back on, put the car to the ground, and torque your wheels and you're done. Woo! All right, we got it done. It's a little warm here, I'm sweaty, I'm dirty, but we got it done. The ATS-V sway bar is installed, and as you saw, we lowered the exhaust and made it so much easier to pull the old sway bar out, and then we were able to put the new one in. It looks like the size is a little different, and with those bushings that are really tight, it doesn't allow the sway bar to move and twist quite as much. I think that that's going to be good for handling. So I'm going to drive it on the car for about a week and a half, and then I've got an autocross to do, and I'm going to report back with my findings. So stay tuned. Wow, that was a great weekend of autocross. Not only did I have a great dry day to test out the new sway bar, but I also had a wet day, which is something I hadn't done in autocross, and it really gave me a chance to test the limitations of the car in the wet. Now, if you haven't had a chance to do autocross, I highly encourage it. I know it's not on a big boy track, you're not doing over 100 miles an hour, but I promise it will get your adrenaline going. You see, we push the cars to the limits. Most of accelerations are maximum throttle and maximum braking. And then the turns, whether they be at 50 or 20 miles an hour or less, are still at the absolute maximum G's that the car can handle. And believe me, that's challenging and it's a lot of fun. You'll find that you're not as good of a driver as you thought you were, but you'll want to be a better driver. Anyway, let's get to the sway bar results. Now, we saw that the ATS-V stock sway bar was about 11% bigger than the CTS one, right? So does that translate into about 10% improvement in performance? Well, obviously it's a very subjective thing. There's no way to really measure it. So based on, me driving the car and getting the feel for it, I do think there was a little less understeer and the car was just a little more balanced. But it's not an obvious difference. If I did a blind test with one car that had it and one car that didn't, I'm not completely sure I would pick up on the difference. But if anything, it does show in autocross. It's not going to show in your daily driving. By the way, the install went great and there's no creaks or anything, and you can't really tell there's a difference in normal street driving. And I really doubt that you'll notice in even your more spirited driving. Unless you're pushing the car to the limits like I do at autocross, maybe you'll notice, but I don't recommend that on public roads. So if you are looking to improve the handling of your car, maybe don't get the cheap sway bar. It doesn't make enough of a difference. I suggest just go big, get the Renix sway bars or the other sway bars that I have listed in the description below, and I think you'll have better results. Now, I don't really plan on installing any other sway bars in this car, as I don't think I'm gonna have it long enough, and I want to maybe compete in autocross with a different car in the future. But I do suggest, if you wanna make it happen, do it. The install wasn't that bad. As long as you can drop the exhaust, it's just 6 bolts, it's pretty easy. So if this video was helpful for you to decide if you want to get an ATS-V sway bar for your car, or maybe get the bigger ones or nothing at all, let me know. Hit the like button and subscribe. You'll want to see that there's other how-to videos coming up, not only for the CTS, but also just general automotive. I've also got a drag racing video coming up soon, so be on the lookout for that. Be sure to hit the bell so you're notified when that video comes out. Also, if you find any other sway bars out there or any other tips regarding sway bars, be sure to comment below for me and other watchers of the show. Otherwise, thanks for watching the Jet Fuel Only channel. We'll see you next time.